By the late 1920s, America believed it was unstoppable. Every day, Wall Street headlines carried new stories of sudden wealth. Ordinary people were now talking about the stock market, discussing which shares would rise and how much they could earn. Making money no longer required producing anything. Owning was enough. People borrowed money to buy stocks, and banks invested their customers' savings directly into the market. The real value of companies was ignored. Investors bought shares with a single question in mind: will I be able to sell this for more? Logic had been replaced by excitement and collective optimism. Everyone was winning, and a common belief spread across society. This time is different. Stocks will always go up, and we will grow rich forever. The market will never collapse. This idea was repeated by everyone, from professors to shoeshine boys. Even financial authorities claimed that the rules of economics had changed. Stock prices seemed to defy gravity, rising endlessly toward the sky. The market was no longer a rational indicator. It had become a massive gambling table. And everyone sitting at that table was convinced their share of wealth was guaranteed. The enormous bubble quietly inflated, unaware that a single pin existed to burst it. By the fall of 1929, some investors began to notice the first warning signs. Stock prices were rising uncontrollably, but companies were not growing. Production was stagnant. Profits were flat. It was like decorating the ceiling of a building with gold while its foundation was crumbling. Large players, experienced bankers and institutions, recognized this imbalance and began selling quietly. The market drifted out of alignment so slowly that it was barely noticeable, like a massive ship subtly veering off course. Small investors and the general public did not notice, or chose not to. Newspapers continued to publish headlines about a golden age, celebrating endless gains. As personal portfolios grew week after week, no one wanted the party to end. On Wall Street, logic no longer mattered. What mattered was the belief that someone else would buy the stock at a higher price. Investors were not interested in a company's real value, only in the opportunity to sell it tomorrow to a greater fool. This was not an economy. It was a chain reaction of hope, and that hope was fragile. The market was saturated with credit, used to finance speculative buying. The moment confidence cracked, investors would be forced to sell in order to repay their debts, and panic would spread instantly. The autumn sun still shone brightly, but on the horizon, a dark cloud was quietly forming. On the morning of October 24th, 1929, panic erupted as the New York Stock Exchange opened. Millions of shares flooded the market, but there were no buyers. Prices entered free fall within minutes. On the trading floor, people shouted orders, phones rang endlessly, and confusion reigned. 2 years of irrational euphoria collapsed into raw fear. By the end of the day, 12.9 million shares had changed hands, an unimaginable number at the time. The heart of the financial system was close to stopping. That afternoon, powerful bankers and financiers stepped in, injecting millions of dollars and purchasing major stocks at high prices. The intervention temporarily halted the panic. The next day, newspapers declared, "The crisis has been prevented," and "the market is under control." Government statements echoed the same message, but the truth was simple. The collapse had only been postponed. Confidence was broken, and fear had taken its place. In the days that followed, the market appeared calm on the surface. But it was a dangerous calm. The intervention had merely delayed the inevitable. One question echoed in investors' minds. What if this really is the end? Doubt replaced confidence. Small investors panicked, trapped by stocks bought with borrowed money. Large investors used the pause to quietly exit their positions. Newspapers remained optimistic, but the atmosphere on the trading floor had changed. Joy had been replaced by calculation and fear. When Tuesday, October 29th arrived, no force could stop what followed. Panic engulfed the exchange. More than 16 million shares were put up for sale. Everyone wanted to sell. No one wanted to buy. Prices collapsed within hours. Fortunes vanished instantly. Thousands who had purchased stocks on credit lost not only their investments, but also the money they owed to banks. People faced the reality of losing their homes, their savings, and everything they had built over a lifetime. This was not just a financial collapse, it was a collective psychological breakdown. That day, it was not only money that collapsed on Wall Street, hope collapsed with it. The speculative bubble burst violently, and the glow of the American dream faded. What remained was uncertainty, poverty, and the long shadow of the Great Depression. The crash of 1929 was not merely a financial event. Losses that existed only on paper quickly turned into real suffering on Main Street. Banks failed, credit dried up, factories shut down. Unemployment soared, reaching nearly 25% nationwide, and even higher in some regions. Homes were foreclosed, farms were seized. Homeless families built makeshift settlements, later known as Hoovervilles. The American dream rapidly transformed into a nightmare. The crisis did not remain confined to the United States. It spread to Europe through banking and trade networks, striking already fragile economies such as Germany and the United Kingdom. Global trade collapsed, international cooperation weakened, and economic instability created fertile ground for political extremism. The financial collapse tore apart not only the economy, but the fabric of society itself. People lost trust, not only in the financial system, but in institutions, governments, and the future. The Great Depression was not just a decade-long economic downturn. It was a deep trauma etched into the memory of an entire generation,